Welcome back to the series on debunking the gap theory, my opinion about the interpretation of the first several verses of Genesis and the 7 days of creation. These are my opinions. I hold them very strongly because of the amount of time I've spent in study, but it's important for me personally to learn to share my opinions respectfully and to hear other people's opinions as well, and to disagree with them respectfully. It's a part of how we as Christians maintain our unity. Perry Stone, I believe, is a proponent of the gap theory, as is my own pastor, but that does not mean that I can't disagree with them respectfully. It's a very important thing that I need to learn because it has caused a lot of pain and suffering in my life. It is an issue many times with the way that I witness to people, the way I minister to people. So that's why that's like the primary reason I'm starting this YouTube channel, is I have my opinions very strong, very firm, but if I do not communicate them with respect and do not receive other people's response with respect, then I'm really not doing my Christian duty. Today we're going to focus on two words in chapter 1, verse 2 of Genesis that are critical to my interpretation of Genesis. Those two words are, without form here, it's the word tohu, forgive my pronunciation, and also the word void. And these two words really are conveying the same concept. And what gap theorists are saying is that in the beginning God created the heaven and the earth was God's initial creation of all things. Bam, in that one little verse, everything created. And in verse 2, what they're suggesting is that somehow as a result of the fall of Satan, that the earth became, that they're interpreting this word became, that this word was as became. The earth became without form and void, as in the earth became ruined and destroyed, and darkness was upon the face of the deep, and there was water all over the planet. I believe that this is putting way too many words in God's mouth. I believe this is adding to Scripture. It doesn't really make sense. I believe the reason for the gap theory is to try to make Scripture fit into scientific interpretation, that really isn't the right way to approach Scripture, that is a result in at the root, at the core, the fear of man. The fear of man that says, oh, well, man is going to make fun of me if they say, well, you're stupid for believing in fundamentalism because science has proven that that's just ridiculous. So out of the fear of man, we have yielded the simple interpretation of Scripture to this idea of the gap theory in order to try to make Scripture fit into science. But my interpretation is that in the beginning God created the heaven and the earth. This is simply an introductory verse. The same way that Solomon says in chapter 1, verse 1, the Proverbs of Solomon, son of David, king of Israel, or the way Matthew chapter 1 says, the book of the generation of Jesus Christ, the son of David, the son of Abraham, or the introductory verse of chapter 1 of Acts. The former treatise I made, O Theophilus, of all that Jesus began, both to do and to teach. Blah, 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 blah. So, chapter 1, verse 1 of Genesis is an introductory verse. It's saying, in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth. Here's how it happened. And verse 2, Moses is saying, now this was the initial state of things before God started bringing things into existence. Now the earth was without form and void, meaning it was non-existent. It did not exist yet. There was nothing but a vast void of nothingness. So let's look at these two words to support what I'm saying. The term without form can be used to suggest something that becomes ruined, as in something that was perfect, that gets broken or destroyed, and then becomes ruined. That the ruined state of the thing is to say it is without form. So let's say I'm sitting in this house. If a bulldozer comes and bulldozes my house, then my house no longer exists. It has become ruined. It's not a house anymore. It's just a pile of rubble. So I can understand the idea of interpreting this word as that the earth became ruined, but that's really not the essential meaning of the word. If a bulldozer bulldozes my house is gone. All the material for the house is still there, but the house, the essence of my home, is destroyed and no longer in existence. So that's what this without form can be interpreted as. Let's read a couple examples. 1 Samuel 12:21. And turn ye not aside, for then should ye go after vain things, which cannot profit nor deliver, for they are vain. So to say that something is vain is to say that something is hollow and meaningless and has no spiritual substance. It's not even reality. For example, if you've got a paranoid schizophrenic meaning split or a schism, it really means not necessarily split personality, but a split from reality. For example, a paranoid schizophrenic will be in his room and he will believe that someone's outside of his house sneaking around in his bushes. To him, he is totally convinced that there is a person in the bushes coming to get him. But the reality is that belief he has is vain, meaning it's non-existent. It's not real. It's not real. It's vain. It's hollow, non-existent. So that is consistent with the idea of saying that the earth was vain, void, non-existent. It wasn't there yet. Let's look at Isaiah 40, verse 17. All nations before him are as nothing. They are counted to him less than nothing, and vanity. So he's saying that the nations, they're like nothing. Again, this word is being associated with the concept of nothingness, of void. So that's the term without form, which is tuhu, or tuhu, whichever. And then you've got bohu, which is only used three times in the Bible. Let's read Strong's definition of it. From an unused root, meaning to be empty, a vacuity, like a vacuum, i.e. superficially, an undistinguishable ruin, emptiness, void. So it can be used as the concept of an undistinguishable ruin, again, like my house being bulldozed, or it can be used in the idea or the sense of void or vacuum. That's what vacuity means. So, so to me, it's just like that paranoid schizophrenic who's like, hey, there's a man out there. He's trying to get me. The reality is, no, there is no man. He's non-existent. No such thing. So it's like saying there's no such thing as planet Earth yet. In the beginning, when it was just God, there was no such thing as planet Earth. Okay, in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth was without form and void, non-existent, and darkness was upon the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. So in the last video, you remember I was talking about how the waters can be interpreted as meaning an abyss, a big abyss. So just imagine a simple early man coming up with these terms, these spiritual concepts. He looks out over the ocean and he sees this vast abyss, looks down into the ocean, and it's this deep abyss of nothingness. Who knows what's down there? Who knows how far down it goes? So that can easily be compared to the vast abyss of the nothingness of space. And to me, that's not a stretch at all. So let me just summarize it again. What the gap theorists are saying is that there's a gap between here and here. That verse 1 is saying that this was a first creation, an initial creation, and then God's creation became ruins. I really don't think this fall of Satan causing the ruin of creation really makes any sense, because it just doesn't jive with the overall narrative of the Bible, that it was original sin that caused ruination to come into reality, that it was not some fall of Satan. If the fall of Satan did happen, it was in the eternal heavenly sphere, which really doesn't have anything to do with the timeline or the beginning. And the book of Genesis The creation is a earth-centric creation. It's a man-centric creation. It's about the perfection of God's crowning achievement, the creation of man and woman in his image. And Satan came in and caused deception, and man caused the ruination by allowing sin, allowing the knowledge of evil to come into his heart and produce evil. That's the thing that ruined God's creation. Not Satan himself, but man's sin. That's consistent with the narrative of the whole Bible. So, first two verses, just a quick synopsis. One more time. Verse 1 is an introductory verse. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. Verse 2 is a verse that is describing this is the state of things before God started creating.